dictatorial with our governor. It seems like he has an edict that he won't compromise. We can pass this fiscal adjustment bill to deal with the state's finances without this non-fiscal item in the budget that devastates workers' rights. Okay. So we would be back tomorrow. It's no fun being in Bears land. I'm a Packers fan and just would like to settle this, but the governor is sort of like Stonewall Walker, won't talk to any of us and has a temper tantrum that he wants it his way or the highway.
Welcome back. 33 past the hour. Joining us now from Madison, Wisconsin, the Republican governor of that state, Governor Scott Walker. Governor, welcome to the show.
Governor,
look forward to. I got two questions for him, and then I'll let you have them.
You go ahead.
So, Governor, explain to us how this is not an attempt to crush the unions, given that collective bargaining is the last thing on the table. What does collective bargaining have to do with deficits and spending?
Sure. Well, first, if I could just tell you how ironic it is to have a U.S. Senator before us from New York telling us how to balance the budget when they haven't done that in Washington, and yet at the same time to have state senators in Illinois who are not willing to come and debate it. They should come here to Madison and get the job done. But to answer your question, it is about the budget. Everything we're talking about is the budget. I for 8.5 years before I was governor, was a county elected official, and every time we tried to do things to balance our county budget at the local level, collective bargaining stood in the way of us making reasonable adjustments to pension and health care, and ultimately avoiding layoffs and furlough days. And I'll give you a good example at statewide on the school district level. Right now, most of our school districts are forced, because of collective bargaining contracts, to buy their health insurance through the WA Trust. That's the state teachers union health insurance company. If this bill passes the way we proposed, they would be freed of that, and instead they could buy their health insurance through the state employee health care plan. That would save our schools $68 million. That's money that could go back into the classroom to protect teachers. That's what this is all about, balancing the state's budget now into the future, but also making sure the local governments who are going to see state aid cuts in this next state budget can also balance their budgets as well without cutting core services.
You're receiving a lot of criticism for only asking the other side to give, and they have given on health care and pensions. Are you asking people in your state across the board, including the wealthiest, to give to help deal with the crisis, the budget crisis that plagues not only your state but this entire country? And I mean tax increases for the wealthy, or in any way has anyone else been asked to give?
In our case, the last possible thing we should be doing is asking the taxpayers of the state to pay anything more. If I have to choose between, and I have great respect for our public workers. The vast majority of the 300,000 state and local government workers have showed up to work this past week. They're going to show up to work again today. I have respect for them. But if I have to choose between the demands of a few union leaders, particularly those leaders from outside of Wisconsin, or stand with the hard-working taxpayers of Wisconsin, I'm going to stand with the taxpayers. We will cripple the economy in this state at a time when we can't afford to have anything more done to the economy if we raise taxes here. State after state has shown that raising taxes is the last thing you want to do when you have a bad economy. Instead here, what we're asking for it's a bold political move, but I think it's a very reasonable and modest request. We're asking for 5.8% pension contribution, 12.6% when it comes to health care premiums. Most of the factory middle-class union workers I talk to across the state outside of government would love to have a deal like that. They think it's about time that everybody, including those in government, have to make a sacrifice.
All right, so let me ask you, Governor, it's our understanding that, and I just want to know if you've been given this as an official position of the unions, have they conceded on the 5.6% for the pensions, the union leaders?
They've talked about it in the press. Two of the union leaders have talked about that in the press, but there's two things about that. One, the beginning of last week, they were saying this would cripple people. There was no way they could do it. There was no way that anybody could afford that. Now, by the end of the week, they're changing. The reality is the union leaders coming in from outside of Wisconsin don't care about their members' money. What they ultimately want is their hands on the money.
What I want to know, Governor, though, again, this is just sort of cleanup, because I haven't heard anybody definitively say this. Have union representatives told you that they're willing to concede on the pension issue and also on their health care issue? Is that off the table now as far as you're concerned?
They've told the media that. They haven't told me that directly. But the reason why that doesn't work is there are 424 school districts in the state. There are 72 counties. There are more than 1,000 municipalities. We cannot have two statewide union leaders magically make sure that those contracts will be settled in every one of those jurisdictions. And when we have to cut billions of dollars from local aid from aid to local government, I should say, we want to be able to balance. Unlike New York, where you guys are at, unlike California, where they're cutting billions from their schools and their local governments and devastating them, causing layoffs, we want to avoid layoffs in the state. And the only way you can do that is if you give local governments the power to change.
So I've got it down.
So
who can come to you and say, Governor, we accept your position on pensions and we accept your position on health care? Who is the person that can make that concession for you?
There is no one. There is no one. We don't have a statewide union. Those have to be decided in every jurisdiction across the state of Wisconsin. Local officials, like I was for 8.5 years, have asked for this not for the last couple of months, not for the last couple of years, but for decades, because they know when there's less state aid, they get it poured onto them. They're forced to make cuts in services and layoffs unless we give them these collective bargaining powers. And they still have collective bargaining rights.
Right. A lot to get through here.
For salary and go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. They have them for salary and what else?
They have them for the base salary, but the other important thing to remember is that Wisconsin in 1905 passed the strongest civil service protections in the country. We have merit hiring, we have just cause for termination and discipline. Those are all things that continue to protect workers' rights in the state that have nothing to do with the contract. They will continue long after we make these changes.
Okay, hey, Mike Barnicle.
Hey, Governor, with regard to the pension and health care givebacks that we've read about in the press, as you've indicated, you just said that they have not told me that directly. Have you asked anyone directly to sit down with you and tell you that?
No.
Why?
No, and I have not.
Why?
Because I'm not negotiating over a budget, because the budget is broke. Just like nearly every state across the country, we are broke. I cannot negotiate for something where I don't have anything to give. The bottom line is we have to change these laws so that we don't keep reoccurring this. This is really about a commitment to the future, so we don't have dire consequences every 2, 4, 6 years down the road. The reason we got in this trouble is because too many lawmakers and too many previous governors settled the budget through one-time fixes. We need to make a long-term commitment so that our kids aren't straddled with this into the future. The only way you do that is if you change collective bargaining so that governments, and this has nothing to do with the private sector. Private sector unions are fine. They're part of the solution. They're part of getting the state working again. But for us, ultimately, to balance the budget, our local governments as well as the state needs to have the long-term tools to make a commitment to getting this done into the future as well as today.
John Heilman.
Governor, you just said that the state is broke. You've been in office for just a couple months now. The first thing you did when you came into office virtually was to cut the corporate income tax rate and enact a bunch of other tax cuts. To go back to Mika's question, given the kind of shared sacrifice that you're calling for and the austerity measures, how did it possibly make sense to do tax cuts that would worsen the state's fiscal situation for the years to come in the context of the kind of sacrifices you're asking from the public sector employee unions?
Well, first off, one thing you're wrong about is we didn't cut corporate taxes. I would have liked to, but we said if you come in from another state and you haven't paid taxes, you haven't done work in the state for the past couple of years, we'll give you a 2-year break if you bring your jobs in. Because for us, our number one priority is showing that Wisconsin's open for business so we can put more people to work in the private sector. We reduce the burden, we reduce the impact of not only taxes, but regulations of litigation and health care costs, because we need to put 250,000 more people to work in the private sector between now and 2015. To get this economy going again. We've got to get the economy going. There's a great piece in the New York Times today about an unemployed factory worker down in Janesville, Wisconsin, a union guy in a union town who agrees with me because he points out that when GM left, the town slowly started to slip away. They need to have a shared sacrifice. They're making the sacrifice in the private sector, and he, like so many other private sector factory workers and middle-class taxpayers in this state, believe ultimately that we've got to balance our budget.
Hey, Governor, let me ask you a personal question. Obviously, we've seen a lot of nasty signs. You've been compared to Hitler and Mussolini and Mubarak, you name it. There also have been some hateful signs that have had a target on your face. Post-Tucson, obviously, we're all worried about rhetoric in this country. We understand your wife also is very concerned and nervous right now. Have you had to increase security around your family and you since these protests began?
we take security seriously, whether it's for me, the lieutenant governor, and all 132 members of the state legislature, Democrats and Republicans alike, because there's a lot of passion out here. And particularly when we see people coming in, being bussed in from other states, that's what worries us. I'm not worried about the people of Wisconsin. We have shown this last weekend. We had 60, 70,000 protesters on either side of the issue, and it was very civil. We didn't have any problems. I don't anticipate problems from people in Wisconsin. What worries me are people coming in from other states trying to gin things up. For us here in Wisconsin, we've shown the country and really the world you can be passionate about the issues, but you don't have to be uncivil in the way that you do that. And we're going to continue, I believe, to do that into the future.
So, Governor, before you go,
I'm proud of the people in Wisconsin.
You'll be addressing the people of Wisconsin at 7 o'clock Eastern Time tonight. What do you plan to say? And do you plan to address, I think, the one area that perhaps is causing the most controversy, which is the issue of shared sacrifice, and the union worker feeling like they're being asked to carry much more of a burden? Will you be addressing that?
Well, I'm going to be talking about examples I mentioned, which actually would point out just the opposite of what you said. The fact that the factory worker who's been unemployed for 2 years in Janesville, the single mom up in Wausau, the small business owner in Richfield, all those people have pointed out that over the last several years, since the economy started to melt down around the globe, they have made sacrifices. They have made changes. It's only been in the public sector where they've been immune from those changes. Those changes are going to apply to everyone, myself included, and my family are going to pay more for pension and health care to make sure we have a balanced budget.
All right. Governor
Wish
Scott
you the best
Walker.
of luck making the best decisions. Governor, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We greatly appreciate you being with us today. And coming up next,